Welcome to More Than Miles, the podcast created to look deep into what it means to be a runner and endurance athlete. Our episodes are filled with real stories from real runners, elite to the everyday athlete. We bring together healthcare providers, athletes, and dive deep into topics that matter most to runners. I'm Dr. Kate Mihevik-Edwards, physical therapist, author, athlete, and complete coffee addict.
And I'm Dr. Kacy Sinders, physical therapist, athlete, and pun expert extraordinaire. We're so passionate about changing running culture to improve the health, wellness, and fulfillment of our endurance athlete community. And we hope that these conversations inspire you to focus on putting your health first so that performance and PRs can follow. Now let's get to the show. Today on More Than Miles, we have Dr. Amber Zimmerman. Dr. Amber Zimmerman is a scientist and elite runner. She studies human genetics and sleep. Amber has recently become well known for winning the Philly Marathon in 2022 by changing her training strategy and focusing on slowing down to get fast. She'll be competing in the 2024 Olympic Marathon Trials in Orlando, Florida, and really looks to swing for the fences there.
Hello, everybody. We had a great conversation with Amber today. So we were able to talk not only about running, but a little bit about science and get to nerd out with her, which we loved. We talked about sleep and how sleep impacts performance and mental health. We also talked about how she's changed some of her training strategies to improve her marathon times by actually just slowing down a little bit and not pushing herself so hard. So it was a really great conversation. We got to learn a lot about her, and we hope that you like it. How are you doing, Amber?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
You're somebody that I saw an article in Fast Women's, I don't know if it was on Instagram or the newsletter that I get or whatever, but I saw you on that and I heard your story about the Philly Marathon and I was like, I have to know Amber.
It's been an interesting time since that race.
I bet
no one knew who I was.
No one knew who you were, and then you said that and all of a sudden everyone wants to talk to you?
I've had a few interviews. It's been kind of fun because, I've been much of an underdog for my entire career. They're like, who the heck is this girl?
But that's how it happens, right?
It is. Yeah, it's kind of fun. Be in the spotlight for a minute.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your running journey. Like, we like to kind of figure out where you kind of came from, how it all started. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I started running very young when I was like 7, just because I was faster than everybody in gym. And that's just kind of how you get into it. And I played a bunch of sports, though. My family got me into baseball and I wanted to play soccer, but never got to do that. I probably would have been a soccer player. My brother played soccer. I just stuck with track. I did long jump and hurdles, and I was mostly a sprinter. And then it turns out if you do all the events, they start to put you in the 1500 and the 3K. And my dad talked me into a 5K because he told me it was only 2 miles. And then he was like, oh, no, I meant 3.
Oh, that's rude.
He definitely knew. Yeah, he ran cross country in college. That was disappointing. But that was the longest 3 miles of my life at 12 years old. And after that, I ended up just getting into local 5Ks, and I raced a lot with the club team when I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, so kind of close to Atlanta. And I, always begged to be on the elite team with the Knoxville Track Club and raced for them in the summer for their Knoxville Track Club summer program. And then, ran cross country in middle school and high school, and ultimately went to the University of Tennessee. And then finally, the University of New Mexico to finish out my collegiate career running track and cross country. And that was a long build for just trying to run collegiately. I was pretty good in high school, and but not like so good that a lot of colleges wanted me. So I was kind of a walk-on, kind of a hybrid at the University of Tennessee. And then I got a scholarship when I went to New Mexico. But collegiate running was not my best work, I have to say. It was pretty subpar, and I didn't get much out of it. I got a lot out of it, but I didn't get much like winning out of it. So after college, I transitioned to training and racing with triathlon and raced for a few years on the elite triathlon circuit until I realized I didn't really like that and I wasn't very good at it. And it's been a series of failures. But then, I started doing mountain running and ultra running and found my way to the marathon. And when I moved to Philadelphia, it just was an opportunity to do a lot of road racing because there's not a lot of mountain racing out here. And so here I am.
Yeah, so I actually want to go back to your college experience at University of Tennessee. What was that like? I know I read that you've had a bunch of injuries in college, and I'm just wondering, like, what were you thinking? What were you going through at that time?
Yeah, it was disappointing. I started having a lot of stress fracture injuries, hip injuries, and things like that later in high school. I went through like an extreme growth spurt my sophomore year of high school, and then that kind of carried with me in college. I was, like a lot of women, I'm just naturally pretty small, but I had really low bone density and tried to figure out the issues that were causing those stress fractures. I was getting a lot of lower leg fibular stress fractures and constantly had hip problems. Just I have apparently, like a really large angle between my hip and my knees. So I think I pronate a good bit, and that was causing a lot of just instability and problems whenever I would try to scale up my mileage. So I was pretty low mileage athlete at Tennessee, which to run distance, it ended up not being the best situation. Anytime I tried to get going on higher mileage, I ended up getting stress fractures. So it was just kind of injury after injury while I was there.
Did they ever work you up for anything, like from a red ass perspective or anything like that? Because with that many stress fractures, that's a common thought.
Yeah, I mean, I did get like a DEXA scan that showed I had osteopenia and low bone density in my pelvis and spine and everything. And that was kind of the main thing. They did a lot of tests like thyroid and stuff like that to look, and nothing that I recall really like was striking. I never had eating abnormalities, big fan of food. So that wasn't really much of an issue for me, but I just couldn't stop having the stress injuries, and we really scaled back my mileage. So I got into all the cross training, which is why I ultimately became a triathlete. And yeah, I mean, I can hypothesize. I think I just was trying to do too much intensity for my body at the time when I had gone through a growth spurt, and I did have really low estrogen as well. And they said that it could be, just low estrogen was causing some of the bone abnormalities. And eventually they went away, and I haven't, knock on wood, had any stress fractures that I know of, or at least I haven't been to a doctor for any in quite a few years. I'm sure you could probably scan most runners and they probably have a handful of injuries, but
it depends on how you define injury, Amber.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if you were to do a workup of me right now, you'd be appalled, but generally I've been able to handle substantially higher mileage with no problems for the last 4 years.
What do you think the difference is?
I run slow, as I talked about a lot in the newsletter. I don't do high volume at high intensity. I do very targeted high intensity, and then that 80-20 polarized training that I talked about in that article. And I just really focus on recovery. I sleep a lot. That's my claim to fame, I would say. I'm a sleep scientist. I highly advocate for getting at least 8.5 hours if you can at night. And I prioritize that. I'm not a healthy eater, so it's probably not that.
But you are so honest, Amber. It's amazing. Yeah, it's great. I love it.
People should know, you don't have to, well, okay, this is my experience. You don't have to, eat healthy food all the time to be an elite runner. You don't have to live a very strict lifestyle, but you should prioritize the things that are important. And to me, that is recovery and sleep and making sure that I'm taking the time in between to definitely recover and not dig myself into a hole. I think I just was in a hole for a very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally identify with that. Yeah, I felt like that much. I'm not an elite runner by any means, but I felt like that much of my high school career, because I thought that was the point of running, was to run yourself into the ground, which is not the point of running, by the way. Spoiler alert. But what I what I love about you starting to run slower, I read that you read about the science and all of the biology behind it, and that's what finally convinced you to run slower. So I'm a little bit curious about that journey, and also that's like how I would like the best runners in the world could tell me to slow down, but I like need to see the science.
I agree. I think that's a problem for a lot of people. And as I said, I'm very open. I was wrong for a very long time. You know, in high school and college, I was told all of those things to the extreme, and everybody is. And people will still argue with me, and that's fine because I argued with my coaches. It's something you have to experience yourself, it's something you have to learn for yourself. There's an abundance of science on polarized training, running slow, you know, recovery, sleeping, taking care of those things. And it's, in my mind, just non-negotiable. And I watch a lot of people who can maintain pretty high intensity for a fairly long time, but they often don't see large gains and they revert back and they get injured frequently. And, you know, you see minimal changes in their races and their actual like outcomes. And I'm not one of those people who likes minimal gains. I like very large gains. And I've noticed that when I've really prioritized recovery, I have much larger gains in my races. So I've just experienced that. But yes, I do come from a science background. And so I read a lot of literature on, nerdy things, I will admit, but I'm very interested in how your body adapts to fuel utilization and how you can tap into different systems when you're going at different speeds and for prolonged distances. And again, if you're digging yourself into a hole by constantly running fast and using all of your fuel on every run, then it's going to be really hard to be able to reach those new levels.
Yeah. We love nerdy. So I'm glad to hear that, and we fully support it. So tell us a little bit about some of the research that you're doing currently and about sleep in particular.
Yeah, so I do nothing in the realm of exercise science anymore. I do have a background in kinesiology, but my current research is on sleep and genetics. I'm a neurogeneticist at Penn and Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. So I primarily look at human genome-wide association studies to look for genetic variants that predispose you for traits like insomnia or psychiatric illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar. I'm really interested in the overlap between mental health and poor sleep. And so how you can use sleep as a modifiable behavior to improve mental health outcomes. So my research mostly right now is in fish. I've worked in mice and things as well. So if you follow me on social media, you'll probably see pictures of my fish. But yeah, I love what I do. I love science in general. So it's very exciting to get to do a job that I love. But I am very interested in promoting sleep science and promoting mental health science and research. I think it's been topics that have been largely ignored for a very long time, and they're finally coming to the forefront. So it's kind of exciting to see that getting pulled out a lot in athletes, elite athletes, especially as this kind of controversy on mental health in female athletes and males as well. But it's a real problem in our sport. And I think using sleep and trying to understand how we can modify our behaviors to have better outcomes. I use all of my science in my own life to improve my training, and it's working out so far.
Absolutely.
Don't you love it when your own advice works? Like I, as a physical therapist, love that. I'm like, oh, I'm doing what I tell other people to do. And guess what? It works.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot for me. In the last couple of years, I've really tried to take my own advice. Instead of just giving unsolicited advice, I've tried to listen to the research myself and use that to inform everything that I do. And it's made me a completely different person.
I love that. So what are some of the connections between mental health and sleep?
There's a ton. Mental health exists on a spectrum. Sleep exists on a spectrum. I think a lot of people don't see sleep in a positive light, and then it reflects poorly on them and their mental health. And I think people need to appreciate sleep for what it is. We spend a third of our life sleeping for a reason, because it's the most important thing. Virtually every species, if not every species on the planet, sleeps. And so it's critical, and people ignore that. And when you don't sleep well, it has really poor outcomes on a number of things, including metabolic function, ability to regulate glucose, ability to recover, and all of those things I can go into at great length. But especially in performance, people don't focus on sleep. And so they have very variable schedules. And you'll see, I mean, I watch it a lot with people. I'm very strict with my sleep, and I wake up at the same time every day. I go to bed at the same time every day. But you can see people's consistency all over the board, because people will go to sleep at 10 because they worked out at 7 p.m. and then they'll try to wake up and work out at 5. And you're just really cutting off important hours of recovery. So my advice is to be as consistent as possible with your schedule. And if that means loading it all up in the front of the day or loading it all up in the back of the day, whatever you can do to make sure that you get it done at the same time so you can prioritize a window of sleep, it'll change everything. And there's a lot of research on morning light for, promoting a proper circadian rhythm, which is important for mental health and promoting sleep at night. So I do all my running up fronts. It's usually in the dark, but it does get light usually by the end. And that's the best part of my day, is being able to finish and have the sunrise, and then I can go on about my day without worrying about anything else. And it's very rewarding. You just feel confident about your day, and you can put the rest behind you. But I do see a lot of people that stress about sleep, and they stress about trying to fit it in. And that's the first thing they sacrifice. And those people wake up tired, they're complaining, they cut their workouts, and then they're upset. And it's just a never ending cascade. So in performance, I think it's the biggest thing that you should prioritize.
I couldn't agree more. And it's something that we actually spoke to a lot of our athletes about. I'd say, I don't know how many months ago, but we did a whole talk about sleep and the importance of it. And it's funny because we do have athletes that there's one in particular that I'm thinking about who will, even if it's cold out, she'll go outside and she'll bundle up and she'll sit on the front porch and she'll just look up at the sky and the sun so she can get her morning light if her workout's not at that time. And it is so very important, but it's free. So I don't know why people aren't doing it. It's like the easiest, most accessible performance enhancer we have.
It is. And that's why I love to study sleep, because it is free and it's accessible to everyone. And if you want to tailor your mental health and you want to tailor performance, or really any aspect of your life, sleep should be where you start, because it's not a drug. You don't have to pay for it. I think people like to pay for things. They like to feel like they're putting something in to get something. But if you just sleep, you get so much out of it. And I cannot stress that enough. But I've converted quite a few people, and I am very happy with that, and seeing how people who thought that they were terrible sleepers, thought that they couldn't go to bed before 10 p.m., couldn't, wake up at a certain hour or anything, or stay asleep. You just change a couple of things, and then they're like, this is the best sleep I've ever had. And you don't realize how much better you feel in the day. I think a lot of people operate at a very suboptimum level, and they don't notice that. And when you show them that you actually can operate at a much higher level, like I wake up in the morning at 4 a.m., I run 12 to 15 miles, and I don't go to sleep. Like, I don't take a nap. I work for the next 10 plus hours, and then I go to sleep. And I'm not trying to brag about that, but I'm saying that you can absolutely have a full day of, not feeling like garbage if you prioritize that period when you should be sleeping.
Well, I hope everyone hears you.
I just wish that people would pay attention. It's not a trick. It's true.
It's true. So let's take it back a little bit, because one of the things that I read and something that you posted about fairly recently was you had said that 2021 was the worst year you ever had. And then you worked on yourself, and now you're much happier. And 2022 is the most successful year you ever had. So when you say you worked on yourself, what does that mean? What were you doing, and what changes did you make?
there's a lot to unpack there. I will say, 2021 was a rough year, and we definitely have these oscillations in life where sometimes it just seems like everything hits you at the wrong time. And it definitely happened that year. A lot of family troubles with my dad and my siblings and everything. And it just all piled on top of getting a new job and moving across the country and leaving a lot of things behind. And I was very alone in Philadelphia, and I just was not coping very well. And I spent a lot of time prioritizing other people and trying to make myself into something that was, I tried to be something for other people. And then I realized, like, this is just not sustainable, and I should focus on myself. I should at other people's expense. I think I had to focus on myself. And so I had to say, I'm going to back away from my family when I don't feel like they're appreciating the help that I'm trying to provide anymore. And I had to back away from some people in my life that I just didn't feel like were understanding the place where I was at the time. And that was really hard. I'm a very introverted person, and I have a hard time often expressing my emotions. So it looks like I just kind of walk away from things. And I did that for myself. I did that to prioritize my own mental health so that I didn't go off the deep end that I was very close to. And so I worked really hard in my job. I was focused on submitting a huge career grant and as many papers as I could possibly submit to bolster my CV so that I can, try to be productive as a postdoc while I'm here. And I focused on everything that I could. I said yes to do a lot of presentations and things that normally scare me. And I tried to do everything for my career as an academic, and that paid off. And then, in running, I just started needing more miles to feel like I was able to breathe throughout the day. And I just started running a lot. And my day is very boring to a lot of people probably. So, I don't go out with friends and I say no to everything. But I started to not feel bad about that. I think I used to make up excuses and say, oh yeah, maybe I'll come. And then I know I'm not going to.
My son actually said to me recently, maybe you should hang out with some friends sometime, Mom. And I thought, I love my friends, don't get me wrong, but I'm kind of happy alone in my house, alone also with my family sometimes, but mostly alone. No, just kidding.
Mostly alone.
Sometimes it's just, you do what you need to do to reach the goals that you want to reach and to be happy, right?
Yeah. I stopped apologizing to people for not coming. I would just say, no, I go to sleep at 7:30. So I don't feel bad for that anymore. I don't want to go to dinner at 7. I want to go to bed. And I just started appreciating that a lot more. And when I saw it pay out in my races and my performance, and I saw myself getting a lot better, it just wasn't even a question anymore. I thought, I don't need to do these things. Like, they provide me a lot of anxiety because I am very introverted. And coming up with excuses all the time is stressful. It's easier to just be yourself and say, no, I don't want to do it. I want to be happy. And being happy means hanging out with my dog and going to sleep at 7. And that's what I did. And that's what I do. And I don't have a lot of friends for it, I guess, but I am very happy with my life that way. So it doesn't bother me.
Your dog's pretty cute. Your sloths, that's your spirit animal, I read.
Yes, it is. We are about it. He's the biggest sloth. He just sleeps all day, lays down, snuggles. I try to get him to go run. But yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, I'm the laziest person outside of running and work. You're not going to catch me doing anything else. But
running and work is like 14 hours of your day, at least.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. A lot of people like to go do things, but I just don't have that in me. I just don't. It makes me so anxious.
Well, I think that's just fine, Amber. If you're, obviously it's working for you, right? And I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of people are afraid to admit that, but I don't think you're necessarily alone.
So yeah, I was, and I get that. You want to you don't want to look like a hermit. But I think a lot of people are, and they get themselves very stressed if they, try to go beyond that and they try to appear as something that they're not. And yeah, I gave up on that. So
how did you get there? Did you just figure that on your own, or did you talk to somebody, or how did you even come to these conclusions and make these decisions?
yeah, like I said, I think just seeing it pay out in my performance and my career and everything, it was very, self-motivating, and I became so much more confident in myself. I'm a lot more confident now than I ever have been in running in my career. I always felt like I was very much of an underdog in both of those things, and like I was trying to claw my way to the top. And I mean, I'm certainly not at the top in either, but I feel like from where I've come in a short time that I am doing everything that I need to do, and I can see that. It's been something that I've come to by myself. I think a lot of people have to come to that realization by themselves instead of having somebody tell them, like, whatever, do this for you and do that for this. But I think over the last 2 years, year and a half or so, I haven't been disappointed yet in my decisions. So I'm just going to stick with them.
I think it's all about listening to what you need specifically, right? And just coming home to yourself and staying true to yourself, right? And I think that looks different to everyone. And I'm actually finding I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, that I need more connection to feel that way. And so I think that the lesson here is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is just to listen to yourself and not have to explain yourself, right? Just be your, like, the best version of you, however that looks like, right?
Absolutely. I just think I spent so much time coming up with excuses for my behavior, and I just stopped doing that. And I'm like, if people don't like my behavior, that's fine.
Yeah, you don't owe anyone that. Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I don't be a jerk, right? Like,
Of course.
you should be a good human being, but you don't need to justify everything that you do for somebody else's benefit. You should do what you believe is right because you believe it's right, not because somebody else told you.
So talk to us a little bit about being a scientist and a runner and competing at the level in which you're competing. How has that been? And has that been, do they work together, or has it been difficult to figure out a balance?
Yeah, I think that's another thing that my attitude has totally flipped on. When I was in grad school, I was extremely stressed about being an elite athlete and a good scientist because I was constantly told that I could not be both. And I had mentors that just repeatedly told me that I needed to drop running and triathlon, etc. And I just couldn't let myself do that. So I tried very, very hard to overcome both of those. And I felt like in grad school, I was just always making the excuse that I wasn't good enough as an athlete because I was trying to be a good scientist. And I wasn't going to sacrifice my academic career. So I did sacrifice my running. And then I realized, like, no, I can be good at both of these and not care, I think that they can both lift each other up. And that's why in the last 2 years, I've leaned into the science and I've leaned into, my strengths, which are researching and understanding. When I come to injuries, I thoroughly dig into research on every injury. And I use that as an opportunity now to grow and to learn how to come out of it. And that's been kind of exciting because I've learned to navigate injuries really well. And, same with sleep and everything. I've just learned a lot more about the sport because of my interest in science. So I think that's helped me balance. And also, you just learn to prioritize time really well. And I think you'll see this a lot with people who balance a career in elite running. I'm certainly not the only one. It's very common now that people are balancing both. And I think that people who are good professionals in whatever they're doing are very good at time management. And like I said, I wake up at the same time, get my running done, and then I work for the rest of the day. And that keeps me very consistent. That keeps me focused on, I don't have time to make excuses throughout the day. Like I want to do something or I don't want to do something. It's not even a thought anymore. And now I just use it as like a superpower. Like, I can be good at both things and there's no reason to not be. I think people constantly want to say that they're handicapped in some way, like their running is pulling on their academia, or their academia is pulling on their running, and they can't be great at both. And they want to have that as an excuse. They want to have being a full-time professional and being a full-time athlete, as an excuse. But when you stop seeing it as an excuse and you start seeing it as an actual benefit, it would totally change both outcomes.
I think this is a lot more common. I mean, maybe it's not more common, but I think what I've heard from people who balance both like a career and elite running is they feel a lot more well-rounded. They're not like, they're not just running and then just like sitting on the couch for the rest of the day. And so having some sort of other outlet, some other avenue for them to like occupy their minds. Like I think even Molly Seidel's doing like some online courses right now, just because it's to pour yourself into running is actually not, we're finding isn't the healthiest way to go about it, and not even the way to be the most successful. So I love that you were able to kind of pour your passions into two different things. And I think that does help your success for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, nobody cares if I do well. So, my paycheck doesn't depend on that, which is very freeing. Mm-hmm. When you're not racing, it's great to win money. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not wealthy, so like any extra paycheck is helpful. But when you don't, like, your life doesn't depend on it, mm-hmm. It becomes much more enjoyable. And I can go into a race, and if I don't do well, nobody cares. I don't have any sponsors to please. My professor's like, whatever, doesn't even know I'm there. And so I think somebody, when I did that Fast Women interview, she asked me, would I ever consider being a full-time professional runner? And I just wouldn't. I wouldn't take that deal, because there is no way like I could possibly only run. And I was faced with that question. To become a professional triathlete, I went through a training program at the Olympic Training Center, and they chose athletes based off of that criteria. Could you do nothing else and put your whole self into training? And I said, no. I said, there's no way. I am not mentally stable enough to do that. So I let that go, and I'm glad I did, because I would be absolutely terrible at just sitting with my thoughts every day after running. I don't know how people do that.
Me too. I would be horrible. Right now, I'm not even satisfied with one job,
I know. Yeah. I mean, in grad school, I worked another job. I filled every minute of my time, because if I don't do that, this is not healthy. But, but
true.
Kudos to people that can do that. That means that you're, mentally probably pretty stable. But I don't think that's most elite athletes. I think most elite athletes are somewhere on the edge, and they need to balance their health with something else, and their time with something else. That's why you see so many of them just totally lose it, and they can't handle the stress, and they don't compete well or consistently, because it just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. And that leads to breakdown in the physical body too. Like that's one of the main causes of injuries is stress, whether it doesn't matter what kind of stress. And then, I think that can lead to a lot of problems. So it's good that you have a handle on that and you know yourself well enough, which I think is kind of the theme of this podcast, is figuring out who you are as an athlete and going with it.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is try to learn what works for you, and don't try to do things just because they work for somebody else.
So you've done 4 marathons, is that right, so far? Yep,
that's right.
What have you learned about racing that distance?
That I hate it.
Hot takes with Amber.
Gosh, it's so hard.
It is hard.
I mean, there are people that are really, really good at racing it, and I want to be. I think that's what keeps me going, is I really want to figure it out. It's a very difficult distance to be really good at the whole way. And I came from a speed background, so I was a miler in college, more so. And it's been really hard for me to adapt to like the really long, fast stuff. I can run super long, have endurance, but the fast speed the endurance speed is something that I've really kind of tried to figure out over the last 2 years. And I think I'm figuring it out, but the marathon, it can go any way, which is what's kind of exciting about it, but also terrifying. And I've had a little bit of all the experiences. I've had it feel really good at the beginning and then terrible at the end, or terrible at the beginning and decent at the end. But I haven't strung together a whole marathon where I feel really good about the performance the whole way. And I finally just did that in the half marathon. And so I'm hoping that I can figure it out. But my body cramps a lot. Like, I don't know if other people are like this. I think a lot of people are, but I cramp like nobody's business. And I always have, even in shorter stuff. And so it doesn't matter. I take in so much nutrition, and I practice it all the time. But it seems like the last 10K, my calves like explode. And I just cannot figure out how to prevent that from happening. So that's my biggest tackle in the marathon, is trying to figure out the last 10K. And I think that's where your body kind of hits that physiological limit. So I'm not alone, I'm sure, in that. But if anybody has tips that they want to share with me on preventing calf explosion, that would be
calf explosions. Well, I immediately thought, I wonder what her hip extension is like. Is she?
Yeah, me too. Is
that what you thought too? I was like, if she doesn't have really great hip extension, she might be pulling too much with her calf muscles, and by the end, they could feel like they're exploding. So just something to think about, Amber.
No, this is great. I mean, I've really, like I said, I started reading a lot into things because I've had chronic injuries from, I can't tell where it's starting. It's either my foot or my hip, but it's causing my hamstrings and calves to just be terrible. And so I've been trying to figure out which direction to tailor there, and I've tried to work on both. So hopefully,
it's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's probably neural tension. Look at us, the two PTs here. All we do all day, we're like, oh man,
come see us, Amber.
Yeah, we're like, come see us. We'll probably do your hip extension. Look at your neural mobility.
Definitely, yeah. I've been trying to do some neural flossing lately, and I think I've kind of figured out the foot thing, but I've always had weird hips. I got hit by a car, and that like really messed up my pelvis. What? And it's been like almost 5+ years now, but I was on my bike riding home from work, and I just got run over. And
I just got run over.
I mean, I lived in Albuquerque, like everyone gets run over. And I mean, there's literally like nobody who rides a bike that hasn't been hit by a car there. And it's shameful, but
yes, it's
not okay.
And until very recently, like I had debilitating pelvic pain on anytime I ran past like 11 miles. It was like I was getting hit in the pelvis with a baseball bat. And so I think I'm finally getting a hold on that. But my hamstrings seem to have taken the burden, because once that pain went away, my hamstrings blew up. So
well, you just let us know, Amber. We're here for you, girl.
Yeah, we have ideas.
This is great. This is the kind of help that I need, because I've just resorted to using my butter knife to like aggressively scrape.
I'm sorry. If you could have seen me, I was taking a sip of coffee and I almost spit it all over the computer.
Yep, it almost happened. It really
did. Because of your butter knife.
No, I'm telling you, like, I don't have time for these tools or money.
You're like, yeah, I'm not going to pay $150. I've got a butter knife. It's fine.
It works really well. I'm quite bruised right now, but I think it's working. And I'm really trying to get that. I was like, maybe it's some scar tissue buildup. I tore my hamstring in August running a mile. And it's working. So
good. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I highly recommend the butter knife approach. The backside, not the front. I did accidentally
not use. Yeah. Mm-mm.
I did that the other day on accident. I used
Okay, I think we should have a medical disclaimer right now in the middle of the podcast. Do not use knives to work on yourself.
Just pay attention. Pay attention. And use a lot of lotion.
Is there anything else that we need to know? I mean, we just got.
Yeah, can we help you anymore?
I'm sure there's a lot of things. I will definitely have an offline conversation with you about my hamstring issues, because I think if I can get that under control, watch out, people. Once these hamstrings are intact, I can feel there's going to be some better days.
Everybody's in trouble then. Everyone at the Olympic trials.
Watch out.
That's right. So tell us what your focus is this year. So what is your training like getting ready for the Olympic trials in 2024? What are you doing to prep?
Yeah, so I don't plan a lot in general, but I don't plan a lot of races, which has been difficult because I've come to find this year especially that if you don't plan like a year in advance, you will not get into any races. And so currently I've been rejected from like every race I've applied to. But so I don't actually have anything on the calendar. I am hoping to run the Cherry Blossom 10 miler if I can get in April, and then the Broad Street 10 miler here in Philadelphia. So I really like the 10-mile race. Super fun distance. I had a great race at Broad Street last year and ran 52:39. So I'm aiming for that 52 barrier. I would love to break the course record there. There's only been a few women in the US to go under 52, and I really want to take my shot at that. I feel like that's a distance that I can grasp because it's before my calves and the hamstring start to explode. So this year I'm really focusing on the speed and trying to build the speed endurance for the marathon. I'm hoping to run a marathon. Also got rejected from grandmas. Are
you kidding me?
No, I'm telling you, it doesn't get better just because you get faster. It gets worse.
No.
They filled up. Apparently it's first come, first serve for all of these, and I just like don't get the memo. So if anybody knows anybody.
Yeah, we'll put this out. Hopefully you'll get some calls.
Put in a word. I did put in for Chicago. Maybe I'll get that. I guess they don't decide on that until later. I'm hoping to try to run the Paris standard, which is 226.50, so that I have that going into the Olympic trials. I am obviously a long shot, but like I've said before, you never know. So I'm just going to give my best at the Olympic trials, and I think it's looking like it's going to be a warm one. So I have that in my favor, I think, because I train in Philly where it's disgusting. And so I'm hoping that, if my hamstrings are intact, got the humidity training on my side, maybe it'll be a miraculous day in Orlando.
Yeah, I hope it is. We'll definitely be watching. It's a while away, but we'll definitely be watching.
Yeah, I'll be out there. I promised myself in 2020 that I was going to go to the Olympic Trials Marathon every year because it was just so cool to have it here in Atlanta. And I have a lot of friends, and I guess I don't know if everyone on the podcast is my friend yet, but we're just going to claim it. So I want to be out there and cheering. And I'm from Florida, so I'm familiar with the Orlando area. But you're right. I mean, anything can happen. You think about here in Atlanta, it was cold and windy, and the course was crazy difficult. And you just never know how things are going to shake out. So you just got to give yourself a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I think in these races, Atlanta for sure, you saw a lot of the elites, a lot of the really top favorites drop out because the conditions, and the conditions are rarely favorable at those races. Historically, they've been quite unfavorable, and you've seen a lot of the favorites fall out. And I mean, I'm quite a ways down the line, but I think if I can get my time into the mid 220, 225-ish kind of range, then it puts me in a decent position, as good as anybody else on a bad day. So, I mean, I'm just excited to race against the best women's marathon field ever assembled, really, for the U.S. So either way, it's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, and you're accepted into this one.
I mean, I've honestly, no, I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. Like, I was waiting for them to be like, we're not actually going to set the standard at 236. We're going to set it at like 228 or something like that. So I'm not even holding my breath. Like, something is going to change. I just know it.
Hope not.
What a positive outlook. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm a pessimist because, like I'm telling you, it doesn't work out. I never can seem to get in there.
Amber, any advice you could give to runners out there who are just starting to become more competitive, or even everyday runners? Like, what kind of advice can you give to people from all the experience that you've had and everything you've learned and researched over the last several years?
Yeah, I tell a lot of people this, like, don't take yourself too seriously. Just relax. You don't have to be an Instagram influencer to be a great runner. And I think this has become like a real problem. And people only care about what other people are posting and what they can show. And it doesn't matter. Just prove to people in the races that you're good, or, just run because you enjoy it. I think if you enjoy running, it'll change your life. And I think you see that across the board, is those people who have had longevity in the sport and are at the top of this sport. The thing that they'll say 99% of the time is that they really started loving running again. And don't treat it as something that's a task that you just have to get done and check a box. Some days it's going to be like that, no doubt. But it shouldn't be that every day, or you're doing something very wrong. My run is the best part of my day. Some days it's very hard to know that you got to wake up at 4 and run 15 miles in the dark by yourself. But when you finish, like, just the overwhelming feeling of being done and accomplishing something that the vast majority of the entire world would never even fathom doing, that itself is very rewarding. So, reward yourself frequently, eat the snacks, treat yourself as much as you need to. Eat donuts, don't restrict yourself. Do whatever it takes to be happy, because that will completely change your life. And I've been a victim of trying to prove that being miserable makes you better at something, but that's just 100% wrong. And being miserable makes you miserable. So don't do that.
That's awesome, Amber. I love that advice, and especially the donut part. I'm just kidding.
Donuts. I go every weekend to Federal Donuts to get my treat for my weekend runs. And it's something to look forward to. Yeah. Some weeks I have 3 or 4. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, I'm usually the one who names these podcast episodes. And of course, I was thinking something along the lines of like listening to yourself, being true to yourself. But now I think it's just going to be Amber Zimmerman, eat the donuts.
Yeah, eat the donuts.
I think that's the perfect name. I love it. I think it sums everything up. Well,
absolutely.
Amber, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you. I think you're super inspirational, and this has been really great.
Thank you guys so much. Again, I always love to be able to share my insights. Hopefully it resonates with somebody.
I'm sure it will. Thanks, Amber.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening today. We are so happy that you're here. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with a friend. Even better, share it on social media, because sharing is caring. And the more people we can reach, the better.
Another way you can help us out is by leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. So give us those 5 stars and tell us how awesome we are. Really, we love to hear how awesome we are. To support our work financially, you can also join our Patreon squad at patreon.com/morethanmiles, where for a few dollars a month, you can help us keep the show going and growing.
This season is sponsored by Fast Bananas. Why buy multiple subscriptions made for everyone when you can have one specifically crafted for runners? Fast Bananas has online yoga classes, strength training programs, meditations, recipes, communities to ask questions, and so much more. Check out Fast Bananas at fastbananas.com or follow them on Instagram at fastbananasrun.
Don't forget that training is so much more than miles.